All right, MA Marignon, turn 63. We do have a Fort Storm this turn, which is always important. Shiniyama has claimed a throne. Let's see. Throne of the First Age. I'm actually less familiar with that one, so I'll have to look that up and edit in what it does. Always scrying with our Stone Sphere, of course. Teleporting in our Wailing Winds, our Horror Harmonica Golem. Also teleporting around various mages. Transmute Fire. So there you go, 36 gems into 2,500 gold, more or less. A pretty nice haul. Alas, I do not remember offhand what we got for the previous cost. For the previous cast, so I'll have to edit that in as well. But still, that is a lot of gold, and we can do that every turn. I think we can more or less survive off of that alone. We wouldn't be able to build any infrastructure or recruit anything, but at least from an upkeep standpoint, I think our upkeep is actually right around there, maybe a little bit lower. We do have a pretty high upkeep, but we have a lot going on. So our wolves are coming in. We found some magic sites, Ancient Temple, I believe that is Astral Pearls, which is good, though we do have a lot of astral income. That said, we can pretty much spend infinite astral. Grove of Fertility, we do really want nature gems, and that sounds like what that is, so that's very nice. And then of course we had a bunch of site searches that missed, as happens. Our blood hunters, only 10 blood slaves. Not a great result. Heavy opposition. So our patrolling is insufficient. We'll have to beef that up. Or stop carting off people's virgin daughters. That's always an option. But it is for their own good, not the daughters. Just, humanity at large, because there are the undead tree people who are trying to take over the world, as we all are, and in their efforts to take over the world, they are fighting some Olmush province defense. Decent amount of investment for Lion Tribe. Not sure I would make that investment. And it's definitely not going to matter because, I think this is probably some sort of pan that's been transformed into a giant and been given full kit. Not going to analyze this kit too much because... Yeah, and nice. I think he must have had a nature gem and large. Yeah, he's got Soul Vortex. Forget it. Whether it's Lion Tribe or not, PD does not stand a chance against this guy. Although it looks like his protection, not that high. So we probably will be stacking up some afflictions, but it's not the end of the world. So that does work out for Asphodel. Very nice. They seem to be leaning on a decent amount of thugs, which is probably a good idea considering that they're going to start running out of gold sooner rather than later. It is definitely super impressive what they've been able to do with Asphodel. And then speaking of thugs, this looks like a Filegran thug against that throne. Kind of an interesting call. No kit on this fellow either. There are a bunch of watchers here who must be just out of range, I'm guessing. So, he'll be able to kill the mundane troops, probably. I don't know. That's a lot of lance charges. This guy's protection, okay, at least gave himself, Iron Skin, Temper Flesh. Okay, so he should be able to handle the lances without too much difficulty. Still, kind of scary. He does have a fear aura, so it looks like the cavalry routes. But as soon as he advances, I don't think he has any shock resistance. He has susceptibility to shock, so I don't really foresee this working out. I do wonder if maybe Filegra went AI. This feels kind of like an AI move. Or maybe just a misclick. That would be very sad. Because, this Watcher Throne can be really dangerous. That amount of lightning, damage is rough. And Iron Skin is definitely not what you need when going up against that. So that does not work out for Filegra, and we'll have to check to see if, they're still in the game. And let's see. I'm not sure which province this is, but Jabalba is raiding it. Decent amount of province defense here from the look of it. This must be I think this is the throne, isn't it? Probably, because this looks like Fort PD. So very cheeky, and they might come away with it. Ooh, nice. And this mage has been twice born, although, I don't know, 4 hit points. I'm not seeing it. I think once those axe warriors get in, okay, some skelly spam. Oh, nice. They got him with the throwing axes. So we'll have to keep an eye on that. Perhaps this is the turn that we send the message ending our non-aggression pact with Jabalva, because if they're just going to sit on top of that throne fort, that's not great. So probably shouldn't have signed that in the first place. I did kind of want to grant their wish of outlasting Filegra, because it was we could probably pull that off, but if they're going to be sitting on critical provinces that we need, then we're going to changes matters. And then these are the independents, the Boers. Not too worried about these. The boars are a lot more dangerous when they're, stealthily causing a ton of unrest. This is a little dangerous. We do at least have bodyguards, and of course, a fire wizard, so that's helpful against the tree people. And that works out for us. We do lose a knight, which is sad, but yeah, we take the province back, which is good, because a lot of gem income out of that province. And then we catch an Almish raid against Asphodel, the angry tree people. Well, okay, not a raid. This is a pretty serious army, perhaps not quite as expensive as it looks, since I think all these guys, well, yeah, we can't really tell from this screen, but I'm pretty sure they're all 10 gold fellows. I will say a bit light in terms of the mage support, I feel like. I think this is just going to be like some Legions of Steel, Strength of Giants, which, I mean, is all good stuff, absolutely. But yeah, I don't really see any Foul Vapors protection either, which seems kind of terrifying. We do have a kitted out hero, very cool hero, but not a mage sadly, so not a super relevant hero. Tempering the Will, I think that's a national spell. Anyway, they're not up against much, so they're definitely going to come away with it here, but yeah, this is a risky army, definitely, to be sending against Asphodel. So we'll try to predict where that goes and, keep an eye on that and, see if we can see its demise or, perhaps it will take some infrastructure. I'm sure that's where it's headed. And then we have Ariu attacking Agartha. Okay, this is just some random raid that we caught. And this is where I was expecting Agartha's army to possibly be... Well, this is where it would be launching from, I suspect. So this is Ariu probably cutting off retreat routes, I'm thinking. And that definitely does work out for them. No surprise there. Although, yeah, in terms of... Okay, yeah, no, this is an attack by Agartha. So they're either riding out... or probably both. So I imagine they took what was in the fort and combined it with that field army that we saw briefly. In fact, yeah, here's a Pretender. Yeah, it's been super kitted out with quite a few boosters, and the same setup that we used when we bumped casting Eternal Pyre. With the addition of an Elemental Staff of Mastery and a ton of gems, air and nature, so perhaps Mass Protection and Fog Warriors. Definitely lots of options with all those gems. We've got a line of statues out in front. I believe these are, sacred and really tough. A lot of hit points, a lot of protection, some of the physical resistances. Like, these guys are really tough to deal with, but they're not very killy. I mean, if they get a hit, it's a big deal, but they do struggle somewhat. That said, we are in a cave, and they do have Spirit Sight. Agartha does like to be in caves. Agartha's also brought out a ton of their, living sacreds, and these guys are pretty solid, kind of similar to the statues in the sense they hit really hard, but they're not super killy in the sense of having a lot of attacks. Speaking of killy though, a lot of Magma Children here, so I hope Ariu brought their fire resistance. Some random dog-headed fellows, just random chaff. Lots of casters, definitely. We can see some earth gems. Wouldn't surprise me if there's some death gems floating around out here. Of course, as soon as I say that, there's no death gems to be found. But a mix of earth and fire gems. Here's the death gems. That would make sense that they're with the Death 5. This looks like a hero. It's also got some air gems. That's either a mistake or reloads. So anyway, all of this to say that, Agartha's put together a really scary force, and I have to say, they're up against less than what I was expecting from Ariu. Ariu has a mix of regular Furbolg infantry along with their sacreds, who are solid but not amazing, in addition to some crossbow support. Probably still plenty of crossbowmen running around from when they used 300, 500 to kill Uruk's Pretender, and then a lot fewer thugs than I was expecting. So in fact, yeah, this guy looks like he's just set up to do some casting, perhaps Foul Vapors, although with all those nature gems on the god, and the statues are not going to care about Foul Vapors. I don't know, we'll see. Some air gems, that's not really enough to be spamming air elementals, so perhaps a Fog Warriors cast. This looks maybe more like spamming air elementals, a few Bakemono, and then a few other random casters. This is probably Army of Gold or Army of Lead, which does mean that we're a little bit behind in our research, at least in terms of the depth of our research. But anyway, enough talking. Let's see these two armies in action. Let's see Divine Blessing coming off on both sides, Fog Warriors coming off for Agartha, and then it looks like a protection buff for Ariu. Yeah, so it looks like Ariu actually went with Mass Protection, which is a little dangerous considering all the fire damage they're up against, but they do have, it looks like 10 fire resistance on the Bless, leaving them with 5 fire resistance, so they're probably going to be okay, but yeah, these Magma Kids are definitely going to hurt. We have darkness going up. I'm not sure if this does anything in a cave. It does kind of seem a bit darker, so yeah, I'll have to look that one up. Mass regeneration also going off for Agartha. It looks like the elemental resistances are just coming from their bless, so we'll have to see a lot of frozen hearts coming from Agartha, I believe. Agartha definitely has a lot more mage support, so I think Ariu is in big trouble here, unless they have like some battlefield-wide spell that's going to make a big difference, but I don't think so. Yeah, this shaman hasn't really been up to too much. That was one caster that I hadn't really gone through, and like, yeah, a lot of fire elementals coming out, very nice, from Agartha. Some Blade Wind, definitely a lot of advance and cast spells. Some of Agartha's mage chassis are pretty survivable, so definitely a good case for advance and cast spells. And it doesn't look like Fog Warriors has gone off for Ariu. I'm not sure if that was never part of the plan, or just something went wrong, as often happens in these large battles. And like, yeah, I mean, Ariu's front line is gone under a wave of statues and fiery beings. And I'd say this is definitely a pretty resounding win for Agartha. Now, I mean, that said, Ariu has much deeper pockets, so, how impactful is this victory going to be? I mean, it's definitely relevant, but in terms of mage losses, Ariu didn't really risk all that much. I think sacred losses will be the most painful component of this, but still, really nicely scripted battle by Agartha, and this war is not yet over. So Agartha does lose 2 of their human mages, and they lose 20 magma children, because it's really difficult to keep those guys alive, but we can see they are really, really killy, so definitely worth it, and like, those are really light losses, considering they wiped out 209 of Ariu's units. Now, I mean, some of those, like the crossbowmen, not a big deal, Bakemono, not a big deal, Furbolg, not a big deal, these swordsmen, also not a big deal. So how many sacreds did they actually have here? Okay, they did have a good chunk of sacreds, yeah. So 49 of their cap-only sacreds, that definitely hurts. The other stuff, not so bad, but this is going to be difficult to replace. Speaking of difficult to replace, they do lose a Troll King and a Troll Shaman. I think the Troll Shaman was Twiceborn, so not so bad. They also lose one of their Elven casters, as well as a hero, although, yeah, this hero, yeah, I think this is actually a multi-hero, so, Ariu can get a couple of these at least. They just show up, and it's not a mage, so that's not such a bad loss. So again, not catastrophic for Ariu, but absolutely a setback, and, losing 49 of their sacreds will have, like, long-term consequences, whereas most of the other losses, they can rebuild relatively quickly, although the Troll King is pretty expensive. And then we're storming, so let's take a look at our storm first. This is where things could go badly for us. And let's see, here's our front line, this fort has been more or less completely evacuated, so I did wonder if possibly an evacuation had taken place, but I wasn't 100% sure, so we probably will still lose a few guys to those rock throwers. Ouch, 2 of them being paladins. We do at least find some of their gear, so yeah, I guess the paladins are decently fast, and they managed to make it in either with our knights or ahead of our knights. So considering that it was an empty fort, that's kind of a rough pill to swallow. This definitely does highlight, why it's useful to have a separate storming force. And I just haven't really done a good job of building one of those yet and getting it into position. But still, not the end of the world, especially since we found a lot of the gear. So could have gone better, but also could have gone a lot worse. And then let's see what awaits us inside of Nazca. This fort I do not think has been evacuated. No. Although, yeah, I definitely think this is worth sending the Horror Harmonica Golem in, because we can certainly rout off a lot of these mages. Although, let's see, this tyrant has no air and no flying boots. And this guy has no air and no flying boots, so that's good news, because that's what sent us home really quickly the last time. Unfortunately, this prophet does have air, and let's see if he casts flight on himself. No, not yet. We probably won't see it, but there's a good chance flight is in there. Still, we only need a few rounds to rout off quite a few of those human mages. And of course, if we get a lucky roll and a Goretide Horror shows up, then, maybe we'll get rid of everything. And then we have some unexpected events. Barbarian Horde, of course. Oh, this is on top of our fort. We're recruiting our blood mages. That's unfortunate. Excellent. And we get our rewards for plundering the Troll King's halls. So a decent amount of gold, A good amount of earth gems, sort of swiftness, that's okay. Piercer, also kind of a marginal item. We get a magic site. I think this provides us with gold every turn. We'll have to take a look at what the site actually does for us. Was it worth our army's time? Maybe. It didn't really have anything else to do, so in this case, probably so. Though perhaps that's just a sign that I'm not being aggressive enough. And then, yeah, we lose some tax records. That's okay. We get some dominion. That's nice. Everybody likes festivals. This is unfortunate. We lose a temple, and this is in Bandar. Lose quite a bit of population as well, but we are pretty deep into misfortune, so these things are going to happen. And then, hey, our province defense managed to defeat the barbarians. That's very nice. And then we find a scout from Shiniyama. Let's see, not sure where this is. One of our forts. We have a decent amount of patrollers, so have to keep an eye on that. We do have a non-aggression pact with them, but they are unoccupied at the moment, I'm pretty sure. And then we finish the Citadel in Bandar Log. That is really nice. And then, of course, these forts remain breached. Or no, I'm sorry, Nazca remains breached. This is the empty fort that we just sent our eagles on top of, so we have breached that, and then our patrollers doing their thing, and I will catch you guys after the jump. All right, this is the situation and what we're doing about it. Definitely understand all of this and know everything that is going on. To start with, in that vein, I did promise that we would check which artifact that I had forged last turn. This turn, but there is no artifact. We did not forge an artifact last turn. However, this turn, we are forging an artifact. We also nabbed the steel ovens, so this is where we're doing our forging, or going to try to do most of our forging from here on forward. So the artifact that we're forging is the Armor of Virtue, which is basically a fancy Ring of Returning, but it costs about the same amount. Gives you a bunch of awe. It's an armor slot, which is kind of nice. You know, if you want to use different kit, like normally a Ring of Returning takes up one of the miscellaneous slots, which a lot of useful items can fit into. So not the most impressive artifact, but I do think it'll be useful. We may slap it on our Horror Harmonica Golem, and we may make like 1 or 2 other golems that, you know, are designed to mess with people. So that is our artifact forging, and part of the reason that, you know, is a slightly less impressive artifact is we are using our pretender to contact a Lamia Queen. Hopefully this is going to be a Lamia Queen that we can give some boosters to, and then it'll be her job to bring in more Lamia Queens so that our pretender can do other silly things like turn fire gems into money, or, you know, whatever else we need him to do. In terms of the actual war, we are pushing forward with, we've more or less rolled that third army into our, you know, main army here, and we're pushing out with the majority of the stuff. Don't really have too much of a front line left. Probably need to recruit more infantry. This is a bit of an older army with a lot of crossbowmen, too many crossbowmen really, but with the reinforcing knights, like, yeah, we have more than enough stuff, so unless Phlegra throws something radically different at us, I think we're going to be okay. We have lost track of that, you know, giant army. It looks like potentially it went after Ulm's holdings, though it wouldn't surprise me if it doubled back to try to defend the throne. Haven't talked with Xibalba yet. Definitely should let them know that they can retake this, but probably also we're going to start taking down the Nap soon. Because, yeah, there's a good chance this thug can lock this down. Like, I don't think there was much on here. Like, yeah, more than 6 PD, but, you know, less than 20. Yeah, it must be less than 20, because there's only one commander here. So, yeah, I think there's a good chance that this thug can take out, you know, this province and lock it down, in which case, like, yeah, we're we're gonna need that, Xibalba. If that happens, then we'll probably just send this army to the north. Yeah, we can't quite jump on Phlegra next turn if we do need to turn north, but we can reduce this fort, and then, you know, it actually will put us in a good position because we would like to grab this throne as well, I'm thinking. Don't really have a game plan for all those watchers just yet, but, you know, we'll think about it once we actually get a border with it, and we'll talk thrones a bit later in this turn as well. Otherwise, we're going to leave this army in place, which is a little dangerous because if Phlegra chooses to break out, then we're going to have to deal with horrors, but in theory, we do have some elements, right? We have some Soul Slave Fellows, some Great Swords of Sharpness, some lightning damage potentially, so maybe we can kill our own horrors that we summon in the case that Phlegra tries to break out. But if they don't try to break out, right, then we're sending in our Horror Harmonica Golem. You know, we'll see how round 2 goes. And then we are also storming this empty fort. And so, yeah, also of note, remember when I said the wolves did nothing? That's not actually true. The lone wolf that survived from that cast ended up like retreating to this province. And, you know, when we failed with our Horror Harmonica Golem, it was this wolf that actually maintained the siege for us. So not particularly important or relevant, but it was, a nice little bonus from that. And yeah, we should be able to storm this no problem. It should be empty. It's not impossible that Phlegra would, gateway some units in. I don't think they have much in the way of astral, and I'm just not really expecting it based on their play so far. But it's always dangerous anytime you're going into a fort. So that pretty much covers our war here with Phlegra. It's starting to wind down. There is still at least one major army outstanding, maybe one other. We did lose track. We lost eyes on their capital, so there could be another force, but I suspect the one that we saw is at least the majority of what's left. In terms of Asphodel and Ulm, it still kind of looks up in the air. I think we're hopefully scrying on this province, but it looks like this throne fortification has been cracked by man, so we're going to move our scout over there to catch that, because there's a good chance if we try to move into this province, our scout will get killed by the patrollers. But yeah, I'd say this war, still has a little ways to go. We have not, we didn't send the message letting them know that our nap is going to end, so we're going to wait at least one more turn. I do think next turn we're going to go for it. I don't feel great about it, but it is what it is. You don't conquer the world by not attacking. I will say that a war with Asphodel isn't really going to net us much in the way of thrones. I suppose we should talk thrones now. That is probably the next most important thing. So we're sitting on 3 thrones right now, and we need 8 to win. So we still have a ways to go. So we have 3. This is going to be 4, one way or another, sooner or later. And then this is probably our next likeliest 5. Now, there's a decent chance that's going to put us into conflict with Shiniyama, and Shiniyama's not that large, so possibly, that's our next war. See, that would be a reason to maybe not attack Asphodel, but I just think we do have a lot of territory potentially to pick up, and we're probably going to need this throne as well. So anyway, right, so this would be throne 5. And then this would be throne 6, right? Which would make this throne 7. And then throne 8 is going to be kind of a hassle. And the advantage of a lot of these thrones, right, is okay, we're going to be attacking Asphodel anyway in theory, and that's probably going to bring us into conflict with Ulm. Ulm is also not someone we have a non-aggression pact with, so that's kind of nice. We can just start fighting at the drop of a hat, and, we don't really currently have a border, and the border that, we don't have a border, and the border that we're going to get is already going to be highly militarized since, we're attacking in that direction. So it's this throne is currently held by Asphodel, might be held by Ulm. So there's a good chance we'll be fighting either or both of them. And then Shiniyama is just not that large of a power. So in terms of a war, someone else that we're going to have to fight, they're a good target in that sense anyway. But for the last throne, right, this one is fairly close. So that would be nice. But then, we'd have to start a new war against man who's reasonably powerful. So, that would be dangerous. And then otherwise, it's looking like more or less we're going to have to fight against Ariu. Right, so this throne is relatively close, but Ariu is massive, so a war against them is going to be pretty serious. There's another throne out here, but same thing, we have to fight Ariu. It's even farther away. Same story with this throne. And that's more or less it. I mean, there are other thrones, there's a throne here, but these are really far away, and would require basically completely conquering man, which would be a pretty serious undertaking. We are starting to run out of time, definitely, right? Cataclysm around turn 90, turn 100. Not to mention that, our human units are going to start to fall off in a lot of ways. Now we are planning on going wide and doom stacking a little less, as we currently are now. We'll probably just doom stack until we eat a Flames from the Sky or a Murdering Winter, and then it's okay, have our pretender make some more gold and recruit up the replacements, and then make sure that we don't cluster them too much. There is an underwater throne. Let's see, I think we just, this guy right here, but I mean, obviously going underwater is going to be a big problem, but if Yis ends up attacking us and we're kind of forced to go underwater anyway, this could potentially be throne number 8. So that's kind of the throne situation as I see it right now. This war with Phlegra is probably the best thing we can be doing in terms of picking up additional thrones. And then from there, attacking Asphodel, like I said, it is important to remove them as an undead nation and as a really strong player. And we could potentially pick up another throne from Asphodel. And then after that, we're probably looking at a war against Shiniyama. Of course, we're on the clock there as well, because there's a good chance that Eiryu is going to be looking at them and is certainly going to be looking at this unfortified throne right on the border. Of course, they did just get turned back a bit from the general chat. They thought they had pulled that army out, so I'm glad I'm not the only one who's, losing track of things. But yeah, I was kind of wondering that, the army seemed a bit too weak considering what it was up against. So yeah, that was not a battle that they were intending to fight, but, that's how it goes sometimes. Misclicks and misplays are a part of Dominion. And then, of course, we just have a ton of troops on this border, so we've already kind of been preparing for a war against Asphodel. We do have a really large, not a really large border, but definitely a substantial border, so a lot of provinces to attack. Nabha is actually mostly not dead, which is nice, right? This is a capital that's pretty close, and now that it's under our dominion, it has growth scales. In fact, I wonder if Asphodel, it looks like they may have chosen to go, full growth scales to try to alleviate their population kill. So yeah, that's something people argue back and forth about endlessly, whether as a pop kill nation, some pop kill nations, their dominion kills population a lot faster. So as like middle-aged Ermor, I think most people agree that it's just kind of pointless to try to reduce, the population loss by going full growth. But Asphodels and Theodoses are not as aggressive. So yeah, people kind of argue back and forth about which way is appropriate. It's like, do you get more points by dipping into death scales because everyone's going to die anyway, or do you try to stave it off for as long as possible with growth scales? So it looks like Asphodel has chosen to try to stave it off, which means that his lands are going to be more appealing than a lot of other pop kill nations normally would be. So yeah, most of the rest of this movement is just site searchers and reshuffling mages and things like that. We are bringing this army home recruitment wise. A lot of crossbowmen. We don't actually have we'll probably try to make a third army here, so we'll probably try to attack with 3 large stacks. So this will be the core of our first stack, and then we'll divvy up kind of what we've been recruiting in these locations and reinforce this army, and then create another stack, and then our third stack will be coming over from this region, and then we'll probably also try to split out. We have been recruiting a ton of paladins, so we're starting to shift those guys around, and basically anywhere that our large stacks aren't going to be hitting, we're going to be trying to hit with smaller groups, maybe just of flagellants, although flagellants with no buffs really don't do well, so I don't expect them to raid very effectively. So we may split out, some knights and launch the attack raiding anywhere that our main stacks are not going to hit. We may also just keep our armies back and lead everywhere with the knight raiding groups, but I think Asphodel is going to be busy enough that it's probably okay in this case to lead with our stacks. And the fact that we're going to have 3 stacks, I'm not sure they're going to be able to nuke all 3 of them. Of course, famous last words. I'll probably end up eating that. Recruitment-wise, more or less full mage recruitment, although of note in our capital, we are recruiting a Holy 3 here. Have kind of soured a bit on the Grandmasters, but I think we'll probably switch back to them. I don't know. I'm back and forth on those guys, but we will want at least, 1 Holy 3 per army just to make our life easier in terms of blessing. Even though, yes, we can communion together our witch hunters and have them cast a divine blessing, kind of prefer them, to be doing other things, making fire elementals, fire evocations. Speaking of fire evocations, so after we finish Alteration 9, we probably will also summon in a Troll King once we've got Alteration 9. We don't have the gems for 1 per army, so we definitely will focus on having 1 stronger army that will have Army of Lead or Gold built in, whereas the other ones will probably rely on mass protection. But once we finish that research, we're going to go up to Evocation 8, which is pretty deep down the evocation line. A lot of people don't really advocate this, but if you're a Fire Nation, it's definitely something to consider because that provides Pillar of Fire. And this is really, I don't want to say the only way, but probably the best way to make use of our initiates in battle. It's still not cheap, right? We're starting to get to the point where, okay, we're not fully researched out, but we're going to want to start mobilizing more mages. We have a lot of the things that we want, and these guys are not great in combat, but if you give them a fire gem, they can do Phoenix Pyre to get themselves up to Fire 2, right? And then they can just spam out a bunch of Pillar of Fires. Well, 4 or 5 before they fall asleep, and then whenever they wake up, more pillars of fire. And that's an excellent spell. And then the other thing that we can potentially do, we're probably going to start making a lot of fire jars, especially now that we have the steel ovens, right? So if we give somebody a hammer, like the fire jars are only going to cost us 2 fire gems a piece, right? So it's going to be pretty cheap to make those jars. I do think that that'll pay for itself, and so we can just start handing those jars out to our initiates, and like every initiate that has a jar like is now a battle mage that we don't even have to worry about, because otherwise trying to resupply those armies is going to be a bit of a nightmare. Like they will chew through the fire gems at a prodigious rate. So anyway, that's going to be an important leg up for us. We certainly have the numbers of witch hunters in a lot of locations. Like we don't really need to like lean on the initiates yet, but I would like to have them available, especially we might get attacked by Yis while we're busy trying to do a bunch of other things, in which case we're going to want to be able to mobilize those initiates. And of course, Yis does not have much fire resistance on the Bless. In fact, none, if I recall. They just have some 5 built in, and that is definitely not enough against Pillar of Fire. After that, Conjuration 7. This is actually probably for our angels. I don't know. We'll see. I do think that the Harbingers are better, but there's something to be said. I'm trying to think about okay, how do we move away from our human chassis completely? And the Archangel that comes with this is a Firecaster. So we will at least have all of our major fire casting covered on a chassis that isn't going to die. Well, I mean, it can still be killed, of course, but just about anything can kill our Grandmasters. So we'll see, and having some of the angels will be nice, but this is definitely a bit of a luxury. And there's a few other useful things, like Wraith Lords is possibly something we could get into, and the living elemental spells are pretty good. Like Living Fire could be a useful thing for us. And then if we do ever make it down, Conjuration 9, Heavenly Choir would be nice. Seraphs are incredibly expensive, but right now we don't really. Our Solar Eclipse casters are, they're going to have to be the squishy mages. Now that said, we don't have to use Grandmaster. We can use a Witch Hunter Communion. So, and we're going to have a lot of Witch Hunters, so we may just build in some redundancy. This is a lot of research and a lot of pearls to give up just to make sure that we have a Solar Eclipse caster that's, not going to immediately die. So probably not worth it, but that's a little ways off anyway. So, this is where our research is going to go for the moment. And of course, I was able to quite easily spend the majority of that, extra, 2,700 gold or whatever it was. Some of that is going into unforted temples. We have to rebuild a temple in Mandar Log. I think maybe we're building a third unforted temple somewhere else. But yeah, we may want to start leaning on that, because that we can foreign recruit flagellants, and so that can just help provide for our flood of units. I don't think it's really necessary at this point, because we're not even recruiting out of all of our forts anyway. So it's I'm just not really sure. It's you don't want to recruit. You want to do foreign recruitment just for the sake of foreign recruitment. That said, though, having more friars coming out would be really useful. And I don't think I've mentioned it yet, but definitely galls me every time I look at it. So I put a shroud on a couple of guys, right? One of them on a troubadour here, and this is primarily to give them spirit sight, right? So that they can actually see the elves in their land. That's fine, that makes sense, but all I've done is, spent some pearls to recreate what I could have gotten with a friar. So yeah, that's not my most genius move. So I think, the friars are really useful, and I probably have not been recruiting them enough. So those foreign recruit temples, will allow us to get friars, even if we don't need the extra flagellant recruitment. Although that said, flagellants are limited by holy points, so we actually are, I don't think we're recruiting flagellants here, but we probably could pretty easily. Yeah, in fact, I even have the gold. Probably should be recruiting flagellants here, actually. Because, of course, as sacred units, they are, more limited than most units. So ooh, no mage here. That's unfortunate. Yeah, as the game gets larger. So I thought we had full mage recruitment. We could have had full mage recruitment. But it just probably had like a witch hunter, flipped him off, and then didn't replace him with anything. I am a little bit nervous about switching over to mass flagellants. I think it's gonna work, but it's definitely not something that I've tested in multiplayer. So I am a little bit terrified to invest this much in flagellant production when they haven't really fought in any major battles as like a significant component of our army. I'd say this stack over here is like really the first one, and it has plenty of other stuff as well, but it has quite a few flagellants, and we should get like a decent comparison point of like, okay, it's like we brought like 40 or 50 flagellants, we brought like 30 or 40 halberdiers. Like, how many halberdiers did we lose versus how many flagellants, and how much killing did the two groups do? So we'll hopefully get a better idea of how effective these guys are going to be in large army battles. But because it takes a little while to build up the flagellant numbers, like I think I am just going to gamble on them at least for a little bit. We can always switch away from them if it doesn't work out. So yeah, I think that more or less covers turn 63.